It's a great pleasure to have Sarah Jones with us from Anchor. And Sarah, you're going to talk a little bit about what Anchor does to kick us off. I've known Anchor for a long time, since I was a community nurse. Gosh, too many years that I care to mention. But tell us what you do these days.
And we have been around a long time. We long predate you, I'm sure. But we are now the largest provider of social housing for older people in England. We're also the largest not-for-profit residential care provider, and we cover a whole range of services for older people. So socially rented specialist housing for older people, home ownership housing, so offering retirement housing for homeowners and leaseholders, extra care housing, so that's specialist housing with on-site care provision, independent living, which is similar to extra care, but has slightly different sort of funding model and setup. And then, of course, our care homes, which are sort of specialist residential care for older people, all of them with a dementia specialism for private fee payer and local authority funded provisions. So we support over 65,000 customers now in England, which is a lot.
It
And
is.
and I try and get to meet as many of them as I can on a regular basis because that's really important to us. We've got almost 10,000 colleagues as well, obviously very heavily weighted towards the residential care side of the business. We operate in around 1,700 locations, about 85% of local authority areas, so very well represented around the country. Once you get the eye in for the logo, you'll spot us all over the place. So yeah, but yeah, so and we are. We pride ourselves on the work that we do, the way we support our residents and colleagues, the values that we hold as well. So it's not just what we do in terms of the services we provide. It's very important to us how we provide those services. That ethos is very important to us.
So, value driven care, value
Right.
driven services, which is so important. And of course, you are filling the crucial gap in the health and social care environment. I mean, we haven't heard so much about it recently, but I'm sure as we head into winter again, social care will raise its head, always a problem. But I think what's brilliant is that you offer services right across the range, from those who are going to be highly dependent on care down to those who can actually manage most things themselves but need help with housing, which is so important because it's not just care, it's also the housing bit of this that is so important.
Absolutely. And when we talk about care and the care and support that we provide, that's very often not personal care. It's not what people might think of as being care in a residential care home setting. It is about that support, that independence, that well-being, the opportunity for people to live independently, healthy, happier lives without requiring those interventions. So much of what we do on the housing side is aimed at preventing people having to use acute services or helping people with their well-being that will mean they don't develop sort of the chronic longer term conditions. It's about prevention as much as anything else.
And we know that the longer people stay independent, so if you can put in a little bit of help to keep them independent, the more well they will be. And it's
Absolutely.
not just physically, but mentally as well.
Definitely. And that's one of the things we find particularly important around housing is that sense of community that people have
Yes.
and the well-being that people get from that. Because as you'll know, there are so many health disadvantages arise from people who are living with sort of loneliness and isolation and how that escalates into health problems. So that's a really big part of what we do is to facilitate that independent living, but to provide the basis for a community where people can really thrive in that environment.
That's fantastic, Sarah, and it's brilliant that you have joined the Health and Social Care Coalition. It's fabulous to have you with us, not least because, as I say, you're occupying that vital space of older people's care in all its guises. Tell me a bit about why you joined the coalition.
Well, I think it's about, as you say, joining up all of those different components. So when I was appointed as CEO, I suppose one area that I didn't have in my background was being involved in public policy making and, that influencing side of the job. And what I found really interesting is that you can have a really clear idea as an organisation about what you're trying to achieve and your vision and your mission and your values. And then you try and line that up with public policy or with local government or national government, policymakers, influencers. And you find that you're pushed into silos or buckets.
Yeah.
So you start to have part of a conversation, say the conversation we were just having about prevention, about preventing someone ever having to get involved in healthcare, and so not getting as far as talking about delayed discharge and how we support all that stuff, actually preventing someone getting into a situation at all. Depending on who you're speaking with, that could be it's health or it's housing or it's specialist older person's housing. It all falls into different buckets for different people. And of course, life isn't like that. Life isn't clearly defined and in clearly defined boxes. It's a continuum and it can be a bit messy and you can move from one situation to another. So I think for us to be involved with a coalition that recognises that and recognises the interconnectedness of things and how you need to look at things as holistically, I think that's really helpful for us.
And of course, those sort of slogans have been around for as long as I've been involved in healthcare, going back to the mid-70s, actually, the holistic approach to people's care. And we haven't managed to do that very well. And certainly part of the Health and Social Care Coalition is to link people up, but also with other sectors, because on recruitment, on things like digital innovation, which increasingly one would hope that the people who you give services to will be able to use some of that digital infrastructure that is coming down the tracks, which again will increase increase their independence,
Yeah.
and also make them less reliant on services and give them autonomy, because for older people, autonomy is very important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that we've noticed. I've been in a sector for a relatively short time, sort of 9 years, but even in that amount of time, you can really see some significant shifts happening. So a lot more older men in housing and care than we would have seen. Now that changes your approach to how we operate with colleagues and the kind of services that we're offering. People coming into housing services at a younger age as, I suppose, more of a lifestyle future-proofing kind of idea about how they're going to manage in later life. People coming into a residential care setting at the other end of the spectrum, actually much later than they might have done, and with a greater degree of acuity. And those demographic shifts are happening very, very fast. It's within one generation. And it's interesting you mentioned the digital side of things, because I think both on that and on matters of sustainability, there is an assumption that older people do not want to engage with digital aspects or with sustainability or anything like that. It's absolutely the reverse, I find, amongst our residents. And that's why I say there's no substitute for actually going out and meeting residents and speaking to residents about what they want and how they want to engage with you.
That's right. And within the coalition, of course, we have partners with expertise, not just in the public sector or the not-for-profit sector, but we have, big companies as well, and linking everybody up. Somebody once said to me that, this was a CEO of a NHS trust, said they rarely get to talk to other CEOs in London, which is where they were situated, let alone in other parts of the country. So that linking people up is really important. And influencing public policy, I think, is going to be critical, because, as you say, the assumption is that older people don't want to engage with digital platforms, but actually, once they start to, it opens a door on having contact with people and family that they wouldn't otherwise be able to have contact with.
Absolutely, and we saw that particularly through the pandemic period. Of course, that really was. If there's any positives that we can take from that period, it was absolutely that, the way some things were unlocked for people, which was really positive. But I think you're right. I mean, that sense, if you're striving for an outcome, which I think we all are, a more positive outcome for people in later life, you can be agnostic about which sector some of those solutions come from.
Yes.
If we can draw on that knowledge and draw on that learning from wherever, we don't have to be precious about it.
And Sarah, tell me about recruitment, because I know it's difficult for everybody, but it's been particularly difficult in the social care sector.
Statistic that 60,000 vacancies in the care sector. It has been really challenging because obviously it's very important work that those colleagues do, very skilled work, which isn't recognised, and I think that's part of the problem. And so we've been very clear, and I think our not for profit, not for distribution status actually helped us in that regard. Actually, we've been able to make some choices about how we approach running our organisation. So we got real living wage accreditation, so we were the first major care provider to do that, and we thought that was a very important thing for us to do. And then we've really focused on equality, diversity and inclusion as well. I mentioned about more older men coming into our services as well, and that was something that we really wanted to reflect amongst our colleague base as well. Obviously colleagues in care are generally women, so we had a big promotion where we went out to recruit more men into care, which was very successful, and that's fantastic. Any kind of diversity like that is better for residents, is better for colleagues, and it's better for recruitment and retention. And we've done a number of exercises where we have and drives where we've emphasised to people that when you come to work with Anchor, you can bring your whole self to work, and that's really important. And we've found that to be very positive way to recruit people. I think when people arrive with us, they understand our values and ethos, and that helps us retain them. It is a very, very challenging environment, and there's a lot of competition. And of course, it's not just in our sector. Our sector is facing competition from many other sectors, including hospitality and retail and other things. So it's a constant challenge to make sure that we can recruit and retain the right people.
And I think sort of opening the door and explaining what social care involves is quite important. People wouldn't necessarily think about it. I mean, young people, but it's not just young people, is it, Sarah? It's about recruiting older people as well.
Definitely, and we've got some lovely stories about people who've retired and then come on to work for us, which is absolutely wonderful. So we love that. So yeah, we'll happily welcome people of all ages, all backgrounds, because it makes for a happy team. And yeah, it's very positive for our residents as well to be able to share stories with people they share a background with. Or someone with completely different backgrounds, so that's really positive. But it is a real challenge. Things like training are really important, as you say, helping people understand what they're getting into, but then ensuring that, I mean, anyone would feel daunted. I'd feel hugely daunted if I went in and did a shift in a care home tomorrow, and I would want to know that I've got that support around me and a really good manager, a really good training program, and that's what we try to provide to give people that support.
And the rewards go beyond your salary. Salary matters, but the
Yeah,
rewards you get back from the care that you give are
yeah.
immeasurable, really.
It's incredible. Something I reflect on quite a lot. As you know, we're all always guilty of using jargon, aren't we? It's something we
Hmm.
just fall into, and we talk a lot about person-centered care, don't we? And I think some people, if you were outside the sector, you'd think person-centered care would mean, oh, you know what time someone likes getting up in the morning, or what their dietary preferences are, or what medicine they have to take and when. And of course, true person-centered care is so much more than that. It's about really understanding that individual, their journey, how you can give them the most fulfilling life, whatever challenges they're facing and whatever limitations they might have, living with them in that moment to give them the best possible life that they can live. And that I find it, I now start, as I approach one of our residential care homes now, I start welling up in anticipation of seeing all these wonderful
Yes.
things and experiencing it, which is quite remarkable. And invariably, when you say to someone, that was wonderful what you just said, or that was wonderful what you just did, they look at you slightly bewildered and they say, I'm just doing my job. And
Yeah.
that, I will never get over that. That kind of everyday heroism, and that it's wonderful what you see when you're
It's
out.
quite humbling, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the Purpose Coalition, what we aim to do is to have an impact. What we
Mm.
are about is, as you say, helping to influence public policy, which we think is important, but it's also making sure organisations like Anchor can have the maximum impact they possibly can,
Mm.
and also celebrating the great stories that are already out there. And I know, Anchor, you've talked a little bit about it, Sarah, what a great job you're doing. Um, Very much a value driven, we would say purpose driven
Mm.
organization. So we need to celebrate that, but we um, look forward to working with you actually and helping you um, have an even greater impact, focus on the areas that really matter to you. Inequality in this country is very bad. I know, for instance, that you would like to recruit from um, areas which wouldn't normally in the country recruit from areas that wouldn't normally think of going into social care. So widening the net, broadening the horizons, not just for the people that you offer services to, but for the people who might come and work for you. And that, as you say, means that you will have a more diverse workforce to work for the ever increasingly diverse number of people you serve.
Absolutely, and to offer an opportunity for a career. So coming to a care or housing and recognise that you have a career that you can develop throughout your life with us as well. It's not just about coming into. I think there is a misconception about what coming in working in particularly in the social care side of the business actually represents, and it offers a huge number of opportunities, as you say, both in terms of personal fulfilment and from a career point of view.
And the career point of view, I think, is quite important. Some people talk about career ladders. I always talk about career paths because
Mm.
actually coming into social care, you start going down a path, and there are lots of paths that lead off, is the point.
Yeah.
It's a great place to start working from which you can deviate and go into other jobs. It's quite extraordinary. I work with a number of organisations now, including the Purpose Coalition, but it's extraordinary people's background. And actually, I met somebody recently who started off life as a care worker,
Mm.
ended up, managing NHS contracts for the care company, now working in one of the big management consultancy companies. It's amazing where your career can take off, but this is just a great place to start where you get your values embedded, your work ethic, and who knows what doors open after that.
Absolutely, completely agree with that. Yeah.
So, Sarah, tell me, is there anything else you'd like to say? I do ask people, it puts people on the spot, so I don't want you to feel on the spot. But, if you were running things, not the country, but if you were a politician in charge of things, what would be the one thing you would change at the moment?
That is a really tough question, isn't it? And I think that the way politics is at the moment, the way the economic situation is at the moment, I think people in government are in an invidious position.
Mm,
Actually, I think it's really difficult. I think when anyone tries to look at the short term, they're immediately castigated for not taking a longer term view. When people try to take a longer term view, people are immediately castigated for not looking at the immediate crisis. It's really difficult. And that's why I think organisations like the Coalition can be so helpful,
mm.
because they do take perhaps, well, not to overplay it, but perhaps you can step back from the partisan nature of some of these conversations. And as I look to outcomes and solutions, be agnostic about where they come from, what sector, as I said, and just focus on the outcome. That's the most important thing, and rise above some of the other complications. Or yeah.
That's right, and actually making sure anybody in health or social care at the moment um, tends to have their brain occupied with the urgent problems because there are
Yeah.
urgent problems on money. You've talked about recruitment.
Yeah.
There will be crisis every day that you have to deal with, and we're all about dealing with the important things, making
Yeah.
sure organisations have impact, but helping you keep that in mind so we do
Yeah.
get longer term sustainable solutions to the
Yeah.
problems we're facing.
Yeah.
Sarah, that's absolutely great. Thank you so much for your time. I would like to thank Anchor for all the work that you do. I've always said that people working in health and social care, it's all about doing a good job well. And I know that staff are very lucky to have you as CEO, but every single member of staff, right the way through your organisation, has got the values embedded in them that make Anchor a really creditable organisation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm very fortunate with my colleagues and my residents. I think I've got the best job in the world.